Please share the story how you were born in Jamaica and ended up in the U.S. foster care system.
Great question. So, obviously born in Jamaica and reared there by my grandfather until I was about 10 or 11. Came to New York, Brooklyn, New York, to be exact, around 86, 87. And within a year, a number of transitions happened. My grandfather passed away 2 months after I arrived in the States. And my grandfather and I were very close, still are. As you have heard from previous sessions, I talk highly and loud about him. And so that was tough. Not going to his funerary rites called Nine Night, which is a big ritual celebration in Jamaica and other parts of the pan-Caribbean world. That was really tough. And then 7 months later in July, my closest uncle, Uncle Bunny, and lots of Bunny in Jamaica, as we know, he passed away. He was found shot in his car, 2 in the morning.
Hold on, before we go there, how did you end up with your grandfather in Jamaica? What happened to your mother and your father?
Well, my mom lived with us in a compound, as we call it in Jamaica, they call it the yard, right? And so the yard is a compound area where there may be 3 or 4 different rooms or like independent rooms, right? Like 1-bedroom houses, right? Basically. And so my mother lived there, my grandfather and his wife lived there, my aunts lived there, which are my grandfather's children, with his wife. And my mom and I, and my brother lived there. And then my sister, she passed away 11 months old due to a fire in the house. So a number of things happened. She transitioned, my sister transitioned, Abena, AKA Tanya. She transitioned around 11 months old due to the fire. My mom was scarred by it, but she lived. Within maybe 2 years later, we were in the States. And then my grandfather transitioned, and then my uncle transitioned. And he and I were very close. And so when that happened, rather than family come together to, kind of sort of, hold the flood, right? It poured even more. My mom was sabotaged in 2 ways. My mom, who worked, as a home health aide, meaning she worked to take care of white people while my brother and I were home alone.
Foundation Jamaican job.
There you go, right, indeed. And she went to school at LIU in Brooklyn for a nursing degree, right? So she was going to school and working full time, which means I, as 12 years old, 11, I took care of my brother and myself. And so on weekends I didn't see my mom, right? And so in that moment, 2 things happened to my mom and us, but through my mom. One was that my mother, the woman that my father and mom were never married. So he got with another woman, he had children with her, and because this woman was jealous of my mom, because my father would talk about us, his sons, even though he didn't see us, he would talk about us. She became jealous and did spiritual work against my mom. Yeah. And so, and then my mother had sisters, different father, and these sisters, my aunts, went ahead and didn't do spiritual work, but they basically put my mother in Bellevue, literally, because they claimed that she was not right in the mind, and really she wasn't, because what happened in truth was that my mother was afraid for us, her young sons, her young children, and didn't send us to school for about a month or 2, but that wasn't paranoia or a mental breakdown. That was because of the killer of my uncle, who was a friend of both my uncle and her from Jamaica, used to come to the window in the brownstone apartment where we stayed and knock on the window. So my mother had good reason to fear, right, for us. And so her sister, my aunt, interpreted that as a way to get back to her for what they felt my grandfather did wrong to their mother. Right? So it was a bit of revenge and using that to bring my mother into Bellevue. And then of course, my mother, spiritual work was done against my mother, whereby she doesn't stay in the place for my mom, even, she becomes homeless. I would get her an apartment, take care of her, food, clothing, whatever she needs, I'm there for her. Because my mother and I are close. But then she would never see settled, and so that was a spiritual work. And then her sisters combined together put her in that place. And so when my mother was removed to put her into Bellevue, we were put into foster care. I remember going to Children and Family Services office in Manhattan. We lived in the office for like 3 or 4 days. We were just staying in the office. And then we were brought to a home in Queens. And then we went to a place in East New York, I think around Myrtle and Broadway, for like a little while. It was nasty. And then we were brought to a place in Long Island called St. Mary's Children and Family Services. It was like a campus of sorts.
Well, how traumatic was that? How traumatic was that transition from being with your family to being around randoms in the state?
Well, I don't know how traumatic it really was, because I stayed focused on what was always important to me, which was my family. And then my only family was my brother, younger brother. So I took care of him. Even though we're 2 years apart, we're actually much more long years apart, because I was always like his father, which I'm sure bothered him. But I had to be, because I was always older, than my chronological years, right? And so I didn't worry about trauma. I just worried about taking care of us. And I worried about getting back to my mother. And so I was there at the foster care home for about a year and change, and I went AWOL, because I knew the routines. And on a certain Sunday, I knew that they were lax. And so I just walked like I'm walking around, and I walked off the campus, and I walked down to the local LIRR train station in Syosset, Long Island, which is where the home was located. It's still there, by the way. And got on the train. Now I'm thinking in my New York City mind, I get on the train, right? I'm good. And so the conductor comes and asks for my ticket. Because in LIRR, for your viewers, on Long Island Railroad, you have to buy the ticket in advance or on the train. So I'm thinking my New York City mind, once you hop the turnstile or you pass, you're good, right? So I didn't have money, looked at him, and then this white man, looked at me, and then he said, I'll pay for him. And he paid for me, and I said, thank you, right? And so got up at Nostrand on the LIRR train. I knew my way by then, and so I walked, I knew once I could find Franklin Avenue, which we lived on Lincoln Place between Bedford and Franklin. And so I walked to Franklin. Once I got to Franklin, I knew, make that left on Lincoln Place, came to the apartment building, I think it's 576 Lincoln Place. Ring the doorbell, guess who was there? My mother. She was shocked to see me. And the first question I had for her, I don't remember if I asked her, is that, why did you come for us? But by then, I saw her glazed look on her face. She was drugged out. They had pumped all the drugs in her. So my healthy, whole mother, who was going through a rough patch, was drugged up. My mom has never been the same.
With the foster care system, right? You hear so many stories. You hear good stories. You hear bad stories. In your experience, what is the biggest misconception about the foster care system?
Whew, there's several. One of them is that, it's a misnomer. The term in their phrase, foster care, there is no care. To me, it is the plantations. It's plantation slavery, because the same resources put into removing people from their homes and their families could be put into keeping them in their families. And I get the argument that sometimes children or a child's life is in danger, and it is. In those cases, but guess what? Those people have kinfolks, cousins, aunts, nephews, nieces, grandparents, right? Someone, even neighbors that know the children well. I'm saying those same dollars can go into repair, into say, hey, which, by the way, it happened, the same idea in terms of separating families from Mexico, right? Putting them with a kinfolks, right? Putting them with a relative. That should be the effort, not removing them into this violent, space. And I was with violent people. I mean, the people I was with, in Long Island, in the foster care home in St. Mary's, these were young brothers, and other young men, a few white guys, and then there were a few Latino guys and brothers there. A lot of them were from Spofford. Now shut down. Spofford was a juvenile prison, right? Notorious.
So they brought that same type of energy.
Man, listen. Now I can hold my own. In fact, they called me Little Rasta because I was from Jamaica, right? But they knew it that they didn't mess with me, and therefore they didn't mess with my brother because I always had him. So I didn't get in trouble in that way, because I would fight anyone. I wouldn't look it, but you bring it to me, you know, I'll bring it to you. So I didn't get messed with, but there were, you know, dudes there that, in fact, I witnessed a rape of a white woman who was a counselor there.
By,
In the foster care.
that's crazy.
Yeah, in the cottage where we were. And it's another story, and it's horrible because you know, no one deserves that. No one deserves that. And I saw what they were doing, and they invited me in, and I said, I went downstairs. We used to have it on the second floor. By witness, I mean I knew what was going on inside, and they would look out, dudes at the door, and when they cracked the door, I just said, I want no part of this. I want no part of this. And I remember I felt for her, right? She's a human being. And so I felt for her. But I'm saying that's the kind of violence that I lived with. But it's not their fault. Because guess what? Criminals are made. So there are people that go to prison, but they're not criminals. They become criminals in prison. So these brothers became, you know, that in the prison of the foster care. Without fathers, without love, without care. Keyword care, right? So that word is a deep misnomer. In fact, it's a violent cruelty, right? And the entire system is about fracturing and separating, which is what plantations did. Selling off, trading off, rupturing families. What's the difference?
But the question, I've never experienced firsthand, I've just seen from a distance, but I just think it's illegal to give so many kids to one person, to one family. Mm-hmm. I don't think they can provide the needs for that child. So it's just like, is it a situation where there are not enough families, or is it a hustle thing? Like, why does one family get 5, 6, 7 kids?
Because it's a hustle. It's a hustle. In fact, my aunt, who we stay with in Coney Island, hustled. You see, the city pays or the agencies involved, they pay the foster care parents a certain amount of money. So my aunt was getting paid money. Even though she's a biological aunt, this wasn't out of love. This was out of payment. And we didn't get any of it. Meaning my brother and I, didn't get any of it. And so, and she was also getting money from St. Mary's, the foster care place. She was getting money from them. We got nothing. Only time we got something was in August when we went shopping for clothes. And she would cap it, and she would be there, you know, we would pick out, or sometimes she would buy the clothes for us. Right? So, and I know, you know, folks who do this as a job. They have 5, 6 foster care children because of the money, not because the children all care for them. So it's a hustle, right? And it's a violent hustle because what's at stake are those lives that are ruined. Those destinies and potentials are ruined by the desire and the lust, you know, for the money can be gotten, because there's no oversight. Yes, someone may come every month or 2 months or once in a while. There's no oversight for the daily violence that happens in these homes, and sometimes you can't even call them homes, right? A great example for your viewers, those who are not familiar with the system, would be Antoine Fisher, the movie. What happened in that, I know that as a fact. That's not hyperbole or fiction, but that's a great movie. Antoine Fisher, directed by Denzel Washington. Folks should check it out if they haven't already. That will give them a sense, and that's not make-believe, that's real.
And I know you said you focused on, you didn't say results, well, you just said you focus on Solutions,
yeah.
Right? Where did the focus come to, like, do something with yourself? Many people are broken. Many people are broken, period, right? But with those type of experiences, many people get broken. Where did you get the strength, focus to do something with yourself and not let that consume you?
Ancestry. My close relationship with Ancestry has always been there. I mean, they look out for me, and I know that because of the connection that I have with them, right? And that connection, which is, again, why I started the YouTube channel, Powered by Ancestry. That's why I named it so, because that is coming from lived experience. That is coming from decades of research, married to lived experience. That's coming from, you know, healing and having clients who, you know, last, you know, 6 to 8 months, almost all the clients, people that I work with, a lot of their spiritual and even, you know, mundane things, obviously, job, this, that, family, has ancestral roots, has ancestral symptoms, has ancestral It's like a vector. That's the force field. And I'm like, this is the pattern, over and over and over, right? So it is that relationship and that connection that essentially just sort of foments into being solution driven, being about, being growing, staying hungry, not being comfortable, right? So after 8 books and the press and this and children and whatever else and professorship and so on, I'm still hungry. My appetite has widened, not for food, right? To be clear, but just hungry for living out my purpose, right? And doing it in tandem. And then the more I do, the more they put on me, and the more I do, because they built me for this, and they give me the tools, they give me the resources. And I share that, give that, and if that empowers people, wonderful, because that in turn will allow them to be more whole and healthy. And again, once that moment clicks and people realize that, we aren't who they said we were or made us believe we were, and we sit on our nuclear weapon, our ancestry, our power base, it's a wrap.